Welcome to the JPA meeting of the Lancaster Correctional Facility meeting. And a copy of the Open Meetings Act is posted at the rear of the room. And let us begin the agenda.
The first item is approval of the minutes from May 31st, 2016.
Move approval.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes of the last meeting on May 31st, 2016. Any corrections? Please call the roll.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Wilchin,
Yes.
Amundson.
Yes.
Motion carries 3-0. Next item is a public hearing. It's on the budget for fiscal year 2016 to 2017.
So Corey, are you?
Yes, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do. All right, JPA budget hearing. This might be the shortest budget hearing that you guys maybe go through. So here it is.
Okay,
Are you making
give it to
promise?
us.
So the total budget for the JPA is set up at a little over $5 million. It's $5,057,157. Of that dollar amount, 195 of that is outside of anything that deals with bonds. So we've got about $195,000 that we had received some reimbursements back from DEC. All of our bond proceeds have been spent. We've got about 195 from the reimbursement from DEC that we're still sitting with, that we're spending down. And when we get into some of the claims, you'll kind of see, we've got 75,000 set aside for ovens, so that will be part of that. Eventually, probably in next year's budget, we'll strictly be down to levying tax, paying bonds. That's where when we'll finally get there. Total tax request is $4,886,600. That tax request is the same dollar amount that it was last year. And again, we're able to do, the bond payments over the 20 years are pretty flat. And so we're at the point where levying the same dollar amount just makes sense because our bond payments are right about there too. So with the JPA, we use the city valuation as well as the county valuation. So we're a little bit different. County valuation went up by 2.92%. City valuation went up by 2.24%. So with that in mind, by keeping the dollar amount the same, the levy will be driven down by that percent. So between it looks like it's about a 2.42% decrease in the levy. And like I said, since everything has been pretty stable over the years, I always like to note that when we started off this JPA 8 years ago, the total levy was 3.01 cents. Now, when we set this budget, it will be at 2.38 cents. So again, as valuations increase, it just kind of keeps driving that levy down as it's spread out across more valuation. Total bonded debt at the issuance when we started was $97.6 million. As of July 1, we're down to $62.7. As I'd mentioned earlier, 20-year bonds. In December of 16, we'll actually make our 8th principal payment. So we will have been into this JPA for 8 years at that point in time. So like I said, this will finish out the remaining amount that we've got sitting in there, and next year we will move strictly to levying what we need to pay bonds. So that's kind of where we're at.
Questions, comments? This might be the shortest meeting.
So
Dennis, you had mentioned the 195,000 that was different than the rest of the budget, the amount that's not being used for bond payments. Were you going to take us through how that's being spent?
well, right now, 75,000 of that will be spent for the 3 ovens. Mm-hmm. The remaining portion is probably still up in. Part of it's still up in the air. I've been working with Brad a little bit to figure out. we do have a claim. Part of the claims is for a payment to IS. And I guess what we could probably do is I could probably have Brad and Nate just kind of address this now, and then when we get to the claims and we've got it taken care of. So,
Actually, one of the things we want to use this for, I got a handout here.
Sure. Madam Chair, would you like me to swear him in?
Yes, please.
Okay. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony both of you are about to give is the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm Brad Johnson, Interim Director for County Department of Corrections.
I'm Nate Atkins, Assistant Programmer for Lancaster County Department of Corrections.
So one of the things that we want to use some of these funds for are, we call them PDAs. This is something that we initiated back when we moved into this facility. Prior to these devices, everything that we did was paper-based. So you're going to see on here a number, information about rounds. We call them rounds. Rounds are basically, it's required by jail standards, and it's just really good practice. That's when the officer goes through and looks in the cell and checks on everybody and makes sure that they're all right. They go back into the bathrooms, make sure somebody's not back there having a medical emergency or fights are going on, whatever. We do those twice an hour in nearly every place, but in the real high-risk areas, we do them as often as every 10 minutes. So in the past, there would just be a piece of paper hung up. The officer would walk by, put their name on it, and date and time that they were there, and you did that every half hour. There's inherent problems with that method. One, I got to rely that the piece of paper gets to where it's supposed to get filed. We have had, past staff members who, for lack of a better term, I would call pencil whip those and, would skip 2 hours and then go back and fill it in like they did it. So there was inherent problems with that. Plus, we just had to store all that paper. So with the help of Mark Weeding and IS, we built this into our inmate management system, and they walk around with this type of device, and there's little RFID pucks everywhere I want the officer to go, and they just scan that puck. Mm-hmm. And it's an electronic log that says this officer was here at this time. It's also tied into inmate management in that they can look on that machine and it'll tell them who's supposed to be in that cell, if they're not in the cell, where they're supposed to be at, and all that kind of stuff. So it gives us some information. The other thing that we use them for is we track our inmate movement. So if they're going from one pod, let's say, to the infirmary, our inmates escort themselves. We don't walk them there for the most part. The biggest risk with that is if I have an inmate in pod that's going to the medical, and I have an inmate in K-pod that's going to medical, but there's a no contact between them for whatever reason, I can't have them out at the same time. Mm-hmm. So this machine is set up that if I scan the first one and he's going, I try and scan the second one, it's going to tell me that this other person's out and not to let him go. So there's some safety issues there. We've kind of gotten to the point where these machines are getting outdated. They're 4 years old. One of the biggest problems we've had with them all along that's kind of held us back on some other things we'd like to do with this technology is they use real antiquated wireless network type signals, I guess. There's only like 1 or 2 channels that they use. And when we get so many of them going, they start fighting with each other, and then they lock up, and I can't get the round done, and it causes problems. So we've been looking at better options with those. And you're going to see here that unit right there is about a $1,300, $1,500 machine. I can use, essentially, it's the same thing as a phone. This is what we want to replace it with. It's just this is exactly what it looks like. And those devices have the most recent network antennas and hardware, and they'll run off of 5 different channels. We have bought one of these just to test with for the last few months, and it's been flawless. And I can buy one of these for about $500, I think a little under. So I can almost buy 3 of those for what that's going to cost me. We've had to send out 6 of those in the last year or so to get replaced. It costs about $500 to get them fixed. Again, the same cost I can buy one of these for. And those, the batteries wear out after about 12 to 18 months, and that's another $100.
$130 for the battery.
Right. So I guess we're here to, I'm asking to buy 10 right now to get started with, to replace the ones, I got 4 that are out of service that if I had to, I'd have to send in to get fixed, or I can start buying these and just getting rid of those. Money-wise, based on the numbers and stuff, it seems to make the most sense to start switching to these other ones. And, I would like, we've talked about starting to do counts with them. I could use them for counts. We're gonna start tracking our laundry bags for the inmates with them. There's a lot of efficiencies I think that we can reach if we can expand this function.
What does the PDA stand for again?
I think it
Sorry.
used to stand for personal, you're the tech guy, you tell us.
Yeah, and to be honest, I'm not even too sure what PDA used to
Something
stand
else
for
in my
because they don't
mind.
even make them anymore.
They don't make them, but that's what everybody calls them, yeah.
Okay. And
Personal data, something probably.
Personal data assistant.
Maybe, yeah, that might be right.
if you start with 10, how many more would you need to complete your transition?
I'd like to, right now I have 30 of those, so we'd probably be in that same range. So personally, I would like to do 10 now, and then maybe at the next meeting, I might come back and say, okay, this is going really well. We'd like to move on to the next 10 or 20 or whatever.
And if they're about 500 apiece, then that would be roughly 5,000, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, Larry, on the dollar amount that we'll be looking at today is like 6,300. There's probably,
There's some extraneous equipment.
it's $6,083 is what it is. So there might, I was trying to take a look. There's a little bit of software that's maybe involved with those also on top of that. So that's why it's a little bit higher than just the 500 for the equipment.
That's-
Todd?
While I have you here, Mr. Johnson, and maybe Larion's read about it in the paper, can you kind of discuss the issue we're having with the jail population? Because I know that we've heard about the increase in population, which if we continue on this trajectory, may have an impact on the JPA.
Yes. So I don't know if you saw in the paper or not, but since, for the same time period last year, which is like the month of July is what I used, to the same period this year, have had an increase of nearly 13% population, our average daily population. Our historical average is usually between 3 and 4% per year, so it's really an unprecedented spike. And we're trying to track some of that down. I still think that this legislation from the legislature, LB 605, is going to play a large part of that. It's kind of hard to tell which part of that is doing that, or if it's a combination of everything, because really what that bill did was, it kind of has several parts, but one of the biggest things they were trying to do is lower the population with the prisons. And the easiest target for them was what they call short-term, which for them was like 1 to 4 years. They wanted to quit taking those short-term folks. So like a felony 4 offense, which used to be a 0 to 5 year sentence, they are basically requiring the judges to put them on probation instead of send them to prison for those type of offenses. Now, the judge has the ability to override that, but they got to go through all these legal hoops in order to actually put them in prison for that. And how that affects us is that when they're on probation, if they violate their probation in any way, they come back to the jail. And that happens, there's probably, I didn't look at my count, but I got anywhere between 6 and 10 of those every day in the facility. The other way that that it's going to affect us is those folks who are, I think, felony 3 and above will go on the parole. I'm sorry, instead of going on parole, they now go on probation because the probation department or the parole department they felt wasn't as adequate as the state's probation system. So again, now they're coming out of prison. One of the biggest pushes was to have supervision of these folks rather than just letting them get out of prison and go on their own. So they're doing the supervision piece, which is important. But again, when they violate that, now they come back to the jail, whereas before they'd be on parole and would have went back to prison. I think the other part that's we're going to see is a lot of your felony 4 offenses that involved money, so like shoplifting, thefts, those types of offenses, they raised the bar on those. So before, a $500 shoplift and above was a felony. Well, now they raised that to like $1,500. So you got that space in between there that now is all misdemeanors, which all comes back to us. And, you know, with inflation and stuff, that makes sense. I'm not saying they shouldn't do that, but we need to recognize we got this gap in here now that all those people are coming back to us. So, and we haven't even seen the effects of those getting out of prison that are going on probation. That's something that we're probably going to see here in the next year. So, we've seen a significant increase in our population. I think some of that may go back to judges as well. You know, a few years back when I was, you know, in a uniform, we had, you know, like Judge Foster on the bench, and he was kind of our relief valve. Every 3 or 4 months, he'd go through, and he was very liberal with his bonds. Well, we don't have a judge like that anymore. All our judges are pretty, you know, law and order, and they don't let folks out quite as easily as he did. So I'm essentially at my operational capacity. About my bed count is 786, and right now, or yesterday, we had 673 people in custody. And I know, you know, well, you still got 100 beds. So but what people don't, a lot of people don't understand is we have a classification system, and we have to put people in spots that best suits their needs and accomplishes our safety and security. And once I start getting over that operational capacity, now I just have to start putting people where I have bed space. And that's when you can manage that for a while. We did that here at the old jail, but your systems start to break down once you get over capacity or you start compromising your classification, because I can't do the programming that needs to be done. Our discipline system starts to get overwhelmed. You start getting people who, you know, are in close, tight spaces, and you start having more fights and stuff. So it's really not ideal, and I know a lot of people look at the state system and have their own ideas, but in my personal opinion and experience, a lot of their problems goes back to they're so overcrowded that their systems are breaking down, and that's, I think you can point a lot of it back to that. So if this continues on with the same type of increase and we don't level off or come back down, I don't know what we're going to do next year. In the past, we housed folks out of custody or out of county in different facilities. The information I'm getting from all these other facilities is that their populations are increasing as well. I don't know how much of an option that's going to be for us. Is that what you're looking for, Todd?
Yeah.
More than what you wanted to hear?
Well, I think it's important, because what you may see is if this continues, we may see the same problems happening in the county facility that we have at the state facility. Mm-hmm. Because, I mean, yeah, we've had that conversation with all our colleagues, and so that's why it's important for us, I think, to really watch that jail population, because we've opened the last pod.
We have.
And so the next option isn't, I mean, it's either contracting, which there is no space, or it's construction, or,
Yeah, or, yeah.
and that's what that facility was designed
There's
for.
some short-term stuff. I mean, I can start putting PE people on floors and doing things like that, but we'll be outside of jail standards, and eventually
That's gonna catch up.
they'll start suing you in court, and yeah, it's not a good situation.
Well, that's definitely a consideration for the future then. But we do have the budget that we need to return back to, as well as to the approval of the claims and so forth, you know. So how would you,
If there's no other people here to testify, you can close the public
okay,
hearing.
we'll
and
close
we
the
can
public hearing, and
move on.
I guess we're down to item number 3.
Next is the resolution in the matter of approving the budget for fiscal year July 1st, 2016 to June 30th, 2017.
Move approval.
Second.
It's moved and seconded that we adopt this resolution. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Wilchin,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Amundson.
Yes.
Motion carries 3-0. Next is approval of claims processed through August 23rd, 2016.
Okay, so my list has 2 claims on there. One of them, the board approved last meeting, and it's for the ovens. We're still waiting. I got an email the other day saying they were shipped, so I don't know if they've showed up yet, but if they haven't, they're showing up. They're showing up real quick. So that payment will happen between this meeting and our next meeting. The other one on here was, like they had talked about, the 10 PDAs from IS. That dollar amount is $6,083.20. That way, once, now, you haven't received those yet, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so those will be coming, and then we will make payment for that again before our next meeting, and like Brad had said, then they can come back and kind of see, okay, is it working for us the way we want? Do we move to our next step? This is just the first step, and it allows for us to make a payment to IS once we receive them. So really, those are the 2 items that we're kind of dealing with right now. And so for today, I just need the $6,083.20 payment to IS approved.
Okay.
Move approval of the payment to IS in the amount of $6,083. Did I get that right?
$83.20.
20 cents.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the claim to IS. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Wilchin,
Yes.
Amundson.
Yes.
Motion carries 3-0.
Okay.
Next item is public comment,
Okay. None?
and seeing no additional public comment from anyone, then we're talking about the next meeting. Looks like it's Tuesday, November 29th, 2016. Same time, 1 p.m. in this location.
Yes.
Move adjournment.
Second.
Moved and seconded that we adjourn. Please call the roll.
Wilchin,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Amundson.
Yes.
Motion carries 3-0.